Imagine that near your wedding anniversary, your children decide to forcibly take you to a farm so they can sell the house you built with so much care, but there you find two people who changed the course of the story. John and Mary were an elderly couple who were going to celebrate their golden wedding, 50 years of marriage. They had met when they were young and had lived together ever since, building a life full of love, stories, and memories. John, now 75 years old, was a cheerful and playful man. He liked to tell jokes and always had a smile on his face. His wife Mary, a few years younger, was a sweet and affectionate woman. Her eyes would sparkle when she looked at her husband, with whom she shared everything. The couple lived in a cozy two-story house, located in a quiet neighborhood of the city. They spent most of their time together, tending to the small front garden, sunbathing on the porch or reminiscing about the old days. "John, do you remember when we met at that singles party?" Mary said, smiling, as she organized some photos in an album. "Of course I do, my love. You were beautiful in that blue dress. I was enchanted as soon as I saw you," John replied, caressing his wife's hand. They chatted excitedly about the 50 years they were about to celebrate. They recalled the happy moments, the difficulties they had overcome, and the children they had raised. That house was full of stories and meanings for them. Little did they know that their ambitious children were planning to convince them to move to a distant farm, leaving the house empty so they could sell it. The golden wedding celebration would be the stage for a big surprise. John and Mary's children, Louise and Marcia, were a successful but very ambitious brother and sister. They lived in luxurious houses and traveled constantly on business, always seeking to increase their profits. During a family lunch one day, Louise and Marcia began to talk about their plans for their elderly parents. "Dad, Mom, you know that your house is worth a small fortune, don't you?" Louise said, in an almost casual tone. "Yes, son, we bought it so many years ago." "It's still our same little house," John replied, smiling. "Well, we thought it would be a great idea for you to move to a farm we just bought in the countryside," Marcia intervened, with an air of excitement. "A farm? But we love our house here, daughter. It holds so many memories for us," Mary said, concerned. "Oh, but you'd love the farm. It's a beautiful place, with lots of space for you to tend a garden and even some animals," Louise argued, trying to sound convincing. John and Mary, confused. They didn't understand the reason for this sudden suggestion to move. "And what do you intend to do with our house, huh?" John asked, suspiciously. Louise and Marcia, clearly uncomfortable. They didn't want to reveal their true plans to sell their parents' house as soon as they convinced them to move. "Oh, nothing much, Dad. We just want you to be more comfortable and happy on the farm. It's a wedding anniversary gift for you," Marcia replied, with a forced smile. John and Mary didn't seem convinced, but they decided to give the idea a chance. After all, their children seemed so excited about the proposal. However, deep down, they still suspected there was more to this gift. A few weeks later, Louise and Marcia made a point of visiting John and Mary at their house. They arrived with smiles on their faces and an exciting proposal. "Mom, Dad, we have an incredible surprise for you," Marcia said, barely containing her excitement. "A surprise? What is it this time, dear?" Mary asked, curious. "Well, you know your wedding anniversary is coming up, don't you?" Louise intervened. "So, we thought we'd do something very special to celebrate this important moment. John and Mary, not quite understanding where their children were going with this. We bought a beautiful farm in the countryside and would love for you to move there with us. It'll be the perfect golden wedding anniversary gift. Marcia continued, enthusiastically. A farm. But we don't know anything about running a farm, my children, John said, concerned. Oh, don't worry about that. We'll take care of everything for you. You just need to move and enjoy the peace and quiet of the countryside, Louise assured, with a confident smile. John and Mary again, this time with more contemplative expressions. They really wanted to celebrate their golden wedding in a special way, and the idea of a farm in the countryside seemed tempting. Well, if you think it's a good idea, we'll accept the invitation. When can we move? Mary said, smiling shyly. Louise and Marcia, satisfied with their parents' response. They had managed to convince them to move to the farm, which made them even more excited about their secret plans. Great! We can go this weekend. We'll take care of everything for you. Marcia exclaimed, barely able to hide her enthusiasm. John and Mary felt a chill down their spines when they heard the date was so close. This move seemed so sudden, but they trusted their children and were looking forward to this new adventure. The following weekend, John and Mary enthusiastically prepared for the trip to the new farm. They had said goodbye to some neighbors and friends, who were surprised by the sudden move. Are you sure about this, my dears? This house has so many memories for you, Amelia, a close neighbor, said with concern. Oh, Mrs. Amelia, we're excited about this new adventure. Our children insisted so much that we couldn't refuse, John replied, smiling. But if you don't like it, you can always come back, okay? The neighbor said, giving Mary a loving hug. After saying their goodbyes, John and Mary gathered some clothes and personal items and got into Louise and Marcia's car. They were apprehensive, but also curious to see the new property. During the long drive, the four of them chatted animatedly about the plans for the farm. The children seemed increasingly enthusiastic, while John and Mary listened carefully, but with a certain caution. You're going to love the farm, I'm sure. It has a beautiful lake, horses, a huge garden. It'll be great for you to enjoy your retirement, Marcia said, smiling. And we'll always be around to help with anything. It'll be great for us too, you know. Louise added, casting a conspiratorial glance at his sister. John and Mary, realizing there was something more behind this surprise. But still, they decided to give it a chance. After all, their children seemed so excited about the idea. After hours on the road, they finally arrived at the farm. The property was indeed beautiful and spacious, as Louise and Marcia had described. However, John and Mary soon noticed something different. Children, this farm doesn't seem to belong to you. There's someone else's name on the sign, John said, furrowing his brow. Louise and Marcia, visibly uncomfortable. They knew this moment of confrontation would come, but they still tried to remain calm. Oh, Dad, it's just that. Well, the farm isn't exactly ours. We bought it, but it's still in the previous owner's name, Marcia explained, avoiding her parents' gaze. What do you mean? You bought a farm that isn't yours? Mary asked, confused and concerned. It's a long story, Mom. But don't worry, we'll take care of everything for you. The farm is an anniversary gift, remember? Louise tried to reassure them, although his voice trembled a bit. John and Mary, now clearly suspicious. This surprise seemed to be hiding something more, and they had the feeling that their children were not being completely honest with them. As they got out of the car, the elderly couple took a closer look at the farm. It was indeed a beautiful and welcoming place, but they still couldn't feel completely at ease. Something didn't seem right. "Children, you're not telling us everything, are you?" John said, in a serious tone. Louise and Marcia knew they could no longer hide the truth. Seeing the suspicion in John and Mary's eyes, they finally decided to be honest. "Dad, Mom, you're right. We didn't buy this farm just to give it to you as a gift," Louise began, with a sigh. "The truth is, we bought it with the intention of selling it in the future." John and Mary's eyes widened, shocked by the revelation. "Sell it? But why? And what does this have to do with our house?" Mary asked, her voice trembling with indignation. "Well, we planned to convince you to move here, so your house would be empty. Then we could sell it and keep the money," Marcia explained, lowering her gaze. "You want to sell our house? The house we built together, the one that holds so many memories?" John exclaimed, his voice laden with emotion. "I'm sorry, Dad, but it's a good business deal. The house is worth a lot, and we could use that money to invest in our own businesses," Louise tried to justify, although his voice betrayed a certain discomfort. John and Mary were shocked and outraged. They couldn't believe that their own children had deceived them in this way, just to gain financial advantage. "So all of this was just a plan to get us out of our home? You used us as pawns in this money game?" Mary said, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, it's not quite like that. We just want the best for you. The farm is a beautiful, peaceful place, perfect for a retirement life," Marcia tried to argue, visibly embarrassed. But John and Mary didn't want to hear anything more. They felt betrayed and were not willing to leave their beloved home in the hands of their ambitious children. "Enough. We're not staying here for another minute. We want to go back to our house right now," John exclaimed, furious. Louise and Marcia tried to argue, but they realized there was no way to change the elderly couple's mind. They had been caught in their own scheme. After the shocking revelation from Louise and Marcia, John and Mary were furious and disappointed with their children. They couldn't believe that their own heirs had deceived them in this way, just to benefit financially. "Enough. We're not staying here for another minute. We want to go back to our house right now," John exclaimed, his face red with anger. Mary was crying profusely, holding tightly to her husband's arm. She felt betrayed and hurt by her children's actions. "But, Dad, Mom, you don't understand. The farm is a great place for you to spend your retirement. And we just want to help you have a more comfortable life," Marcia tried to argue, in an almost pleading tone. "Help. You deceived us, you used our trust to achieve your selfish goals," Mary retorted, her voice choked with emotion. Louise intervened, trying to calm the tensions. "Look, we didn't want to hurt you. We just thought it would be better for you to live in a more peaceful and spacious place." "More peaceful? This farm isn't even yours. You were planning to get us out of our house so you could sell it and keep the money," John said, pointing an accusing finger at his children. "We're not staying a minute longer on this farm. We want to go back to our house right now," Mary demanded, wiping her tears with trembling hands. John nodded firmly, making it clear he would not accept any more arguments. They had been deceived and were not willing to yield. Without an option, Luis and Marcia had to accept the elderly couple's decision. They felt ashamed and regretful for having plotted that plan behind their parents' backs. After John and Mary made it clear they would not stay on the farm, a heated argument erupted between them and their children, Luis and Marcia. "How could you deceive us like that? We've always trusted you," John exclaimed, his voice laden with disappointment. "Dad, we just wanted to help you have a more peaceful and comfortable retirement life," Luis tried to justify, although his expression betrayed his embarrassment. "Help? You only think about money and personal gain, don't you?" Mary retorted, the tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "It's not like that, Mom. We just want the best for you. The farm is a great place to spend your old age," Marcia argued, in an almost pleading tone. "The best for us? You used us as pawns in this game of ambition and greed," John yelled, pointing an accusing finger at his children. "But, Mom, Dad, please, listen to us. We just want to help," Marcia insisted, trying to hold on to Mary's arm. However, John pushed her away with a rough gesture. "Help? You just want to take advantage of us and sell our house." The argument dragged on for several minutes, with accusations and shouts from both sides. John and Mary felt betrayed and hurt, while Luis and Marcia tried, unsuccessfully, to justify their actions. Tired of the fight and unable to reach an agreement, the elderly couple decided they had nothing more to do there. They were determined to return to their home as soon as possible. John and Mary were exhausted and determined to leave that farm as soon as possible. They couldn't stand any more of Luis and Marcia's attempts to justify their dishonest plans. "I can't stand being here anymore, John. Let's go before they come up with another excuse," Mary said, wiping the tears that insisted on streaming down her face. "Yes, my dear. We're going back to our house right now. I won't let them use us like that," John replied, holding his wife's trembling hand. They hurried to gather some of their few belongings and quickly left the farm. Luis and Marcia called out to them, asking them to wait, but John and Mary didn't want to hear anything more. "You betrayed us and no longer deserve our trust. Keep this farm and do whatever you want with it," John shouted as they hurried towards the road. Mary, with a broken heart, simply waved to her children with a look full of disappointment and sadness. She couldn't understand how those who should have loved them unconditionally had been capable of plotting such a plan. When they reached the road, John and Mary realized they had no way to get back home. They hadn't brought the car and didn't have enough money for a taxi. They sat on a wooden fence, tired and desperate. "What are we going to do now, John? We have no way to get back to our house," Mary said, her voice trembling. "Calm down, my love. We'll find a way, don't worry. We can't stay here, waiting for them to come back," John reassured her, putting his arm around his wife's shoulders. Desperate and unsure of what to do, John and Mary spotted a car approaching on the road. They quickly got up, hoping to get a ride. "Look, John, there's a car coming. Maybe they can help us," Mary said, squeezing her husband's arm. John waved frantically, trying to catch the driver's attention. As the car approached, they could see it was a young couple. "Please, help us. We urgently need to get back to our house," John cried, his voice full of desperation. The car stopped, and a young man, apparently around 30 years old, leaned out the window. "What happened, sir? Do you need help?" the young man asked, concerned. Yes, young man, we desperately need to get back to our house. Our children brought us to this farm, and now we have no way to leave, Mary explained, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. A woman, who seemed to be the young man's wife, also spoke up. Goodness, you're in trouble. Get in the car, please, we'll help you. John and Mary, relieved to have finally found someone willing to help them, quickly got into the car, eager to leave that farm as soon as possible. Thank you very much, young people. You don't know how much this means to us, John said, shaking the young man's hand. Don't worry, we'll take you back home. My name is Lucas, and this is my wife, Isabella. Tell us what happened, the driver responded, with a kind look. John and Mary felt comforted by the sympathy and concern of that young couple. Finally, they saw an opportunity to escape that situation and return to their beloved home. John and Mary then reported, through tears, the entire plan their children had hatched to convince them to move to the farm and later sell the family home. My God, what a terrible situation. I can't believe your own children did this, Lucas exclaimed, shocked by the story. They only think about money and their own advantages. They didn't care about deceiving us and taking us out of our home, Mary said, her voice choked with emotion. Isabella reached out and gently squeezed Mary's hand. How outrageous! You don't deserve to go through this. Get out of here as soon as possible and go back to your beloved home. Are you sure you want to get involved in this? We don't want to cause more problems, John said, concerned. Of course we're sure. We can't let your children take advantage of you like this, Lucas responded, firmly. Exactly. You built this house with so much love, you can't just let it go, Isabella added, giving the elderly couple an encouraging look. Mary squeezed John's hand, her eyes shining with a spark of hope. I don't know how to thank you too. We are so grateful for this help. No need to thank us, Mrs. Mary. We're doing this from the heart, Lucas said, smiling. As they approached the house, the tension increased. John and Mary feared what they might find, but they knew they had to face the situation head-on. When they arrived, they immediately spotted an unfamiliar car parked in front. A "For Sale" sign had been placed at the entrance. I can't believe it. They've already started the selling process, John exclaimed, his voice trembling with indignation. Calm down, let's go in and confront them immediately, Isabella said, determined. Together, the group entered the house, prepared to confront Luis and Marcia and prevent them from carrying out their selfish plans. Upon entering the house, John and Mary were horrified to find a real estate agent present. It was clear that Luis and Marcia had already started the sale process, despite their previous vehement refusals. But what is the meaning of this? John exclaimed, his voice laden with disbelief. The real estate agent, a middle-aged woman with a forced smile, quickly approached the group. Good afternoon. You must be the homeowners. I'm Realtor Mrs. Silva, in charge of selling this beautiful residence, she said, extending her hand to greet them. Homeowners. This is our house, Mrs. Silva. Our children have no right to sell it. Mary exclaimed, clinging to John's arm. Luis and Marcia, who had been observing the scene from afar, finally approached. Mom, Dad, what are you doing here? We've already discussed this, Marcia said, visibly uncomfortable. Discussed? You deceived us and now you want to sell our home. John shot back, pointing an accusing finger at his children. Mrs. Silva cleared her throat, trying to regain control of the situation. "Well, it seems there's a misunderstanding here. Perhaps it's best we discuss this privately." "There's nothing to discuss, Mrs. Silva. This house is not for sale," Mary declared, firmly. Lucas and Isabella, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke up. "I'm sorry, but this property belongs to Mr. and Mrs. John and Mary." "You have no right to sell it," Lucas said, with authority. The realtor looked at the young couple, visibly confused. "You are friends of the family who have come to help them in this situation." "This sale is not going to happen," Isabella interrupted, with a warning look. Luis and Marcia seemed dazed, unsure how to react to this unexpected intervention. They had planned everything so well, but now their plans seemed to be crumbling. The confrontation had only just begun, and John, Mary, Lucas, and Isabella were determined to prevent this family from being deceived and robbed of their home once again. Faced with the unexpected confrontation, the real estate agent became visibly uncomfortable. She looked from John and Mary to Luis and Marcia, unsure how to proceed. "Are you telling me this sale can't happen?" Mrs. Silva asked, hesitantly. "That's right, Mrs. Silva. This house belongs to us, John and Mary, and not to our children," John responded, firmly. Luis and Marcia tried to intervene, but Lucas and Isabella interrupted them. "Look, you deceived and now you want to take advantage of your parents." "That's not going to happen," Isabella said, glaring at them with indignation. "But we only want what's best for them. The farm is a great place for them to spend their retirement," Marcia argued, in an almost pleading tone. "Spend our retirement? You just wanted to get us out of here so you could sell our home," Mary exclaimed, tears streaming down her face. The realtor looked at the scene, clearly uncomfortable. "Well, it seems there's a family conflict here. I think it's best I leave and come back another day." "You won't be coming back another day, Mrs. Silva. This sale is not happening. This house is not for sale," John stated, emphatically. Luis and Marcia, realizing they could no longer hide their true intentions. They had been caught red-handed. "You don't understand. We need the money from this sale to invest in our businesses," Luis tried to argue, in a last-ditch effort. "Your businesses? Since when are your businesses more important than the home of your own parents?" Isabella shot back, indignantly. John and Mary watched the scene with relief. Finally, they were no longer alone in this battle. With the help of Lucas and Isabella, they had managed to interrupt the sale process and confront their children. "It's over, Luis and Marcia. You lose. This house is going nowhere," John declared, with a victorious smile. "But we have no way to go, my dear. Our children brought us here, and now we have no car and no money to get back," John explained, visibly worried. Lucas and Isabella, moved by compassion. They couldn't imagine how that elderly couple, who had built a life together, felt at that moment. "Then you'll stay with us on the farm until we can arrange a way for you to return home," Lucas said, firmly. "Stay with you? But we don't want to be a bother, my young friend," Mary responded, hesitantly. "It's no bother at all. You need a safe place to stay until you resolve this situation. Please, stay with us," Isabella insisted, offering a welcoming smile. John and Mary, surprised and moved by the generosity of that couple. After so much suffering and disappointment, they had finally found someone willing to help them. Thank you so much, you are so kind. We accept your invitation, John replied, squeezing Lucas's hand with gratitude. Isabella smiled with relief and put the car in motion, taking John and Mary back to the farm. They knew that young couple would be a blessing in that difficult moment. After being welcomed with so much kindness by Lucas and Isabella, John and Mary felt a bit more calm and secure on the farm. Even with all the drama they had experienced, they were grateful for the help of that young couple. While enjoying a meal prepared by Isabella, John and Mary began to reminisce about the memories of their long journey together. You know, we met when we were very young. I was only 18 when I first saw Mary at a party, John said, a nostalgic smile on his wrinkled face. Oh, yes, I remember that day as if it were yesterday. You looked so handsome in that gray suit, Mary replied, affectionately squeezing her husband's hand. Lucas and Isabella watched them attentively, enchanted by the love story of that couple. I was absolutely captivated the moment I saw her. It was love at first sight, I believe, John continued, his eyes shining. And I couldn't believe that handsome young man had noticed me. But at the end of the party, he came to talk to me and asked me out, Mary said, smiling shyly. And since then, we've never parted. We've built an entire life together, facing ups and downs, but always with a lot of love and companionship, John concluded, tenderly caressing his wife's face. Isabella had been moved by the story. How beautiful. You set such a wonderful example of lasting love. It's true, my dear. We've been through a lot together, but our love has always prevailed, Mary responded, discreetly wiping away a tear. Lucas watched the couple with admiration. I'm glad you found each other and built this beautiful life. It's a shame you are now going through this difficult situation with your children. John sighed heavily. Yes, it's very sad. We've always trusted them so much, and now we feel betrayed. Isabella and Lucas, touched by the story of that couple. They knew they needed to do something to help them resolve that situation. After hearing the moving love story of John and Mary, Lucas and Isabella became even more determined to help the elderly couple resolve their situation with their ambitious children. Wow, you've been through so much together. It's sad to see that now your own children are trying to take you out of the house where you built so many memories, Isabella said, her voice choked with emotion. It's true, my dear. We've always been such a close-knit family, and now we feel betrayed and hurt, Mary replied, squeezing the young woman's hand. Lucas observed the elderly couple with a compassionate gaze. We can't let them take advantage of you like this. You deserve so much more than that. John sighed heavily. We don't know what else to do. Our children are determined to sell our house and won't back down. Isabella and Lucas, determined to help John and Mary. They couldn't let that family be destroyed by greed and ambition. Listen, we're going to help you confront your children and prevent them from selling your house, Lucas said, firmly. Would you really do that for us? Mary asked, her eyes shining with hope. Of course. You can't just give up. We'll go back to your home and face this situation head-on, Isabella responded, with an encouraging smile. John and Mary, moved by the generosity of that young couple. They had already lost hope, but now they felt empowered to fight for what was rightfully theirs. We don't know how to thank you. You are angels in our lives, John said, squeezing Lucas's hand with gratitude. No need to thank us. We'll do whatever it takes to help you recover your home and your dignity, Lucas responded, with determination. Isabella stood up, ready to leave. "Then let's go. The sooner we confront your children, the better." John and Mary felt renewed by the courage and empathy of that young couple. Together, they were ready to face the final battle and reclaim what was theirs. Excited and determined, John, Mary, Lucas, and Isabella immediately left the farm and headed towards the elderly couple's home. They knew there was no time to waste, as John and Mary's ambitious children could start the sale process at any moment. During the journey, John and Mary nervously conversed with the young couple. Defeated, the children had no choice but to accept their parents' decision. They retreated in silence, ashamed of having been exposed in their petty scheme. John, Mary, Lucas, and Isabella celebrated the victory, relieved to have been able to protect the beloved home of the elderly couple. After having faced such a tumultuous situation, John and Mary felt the need to celebrate their victory and the love that united them. They decided to organize a new wedding celebration in their beloved home, this time with the special presence of Lucas and Isabella. "Dear friends, we have no words to thank you for everything you've done for us," John said, raising his glass of champagne. "You saved us in that difficult moment. Without your help, we wouldn't have been able to prevent the sale of our home," Mary added, her eyes shining with emotion. Lucas and Isabella smiled, clearly touched by the words of the elderly couple. "It was nothing, John and Mary. We couldn't just sit and watch you being deceived like that. You deserve so much more than that," Isabella responded, gently squeezing Mary's hand. "That's right. You built an entire life in this house. It's so much more than just bricks and walls," Lucas added, raising his glass. The party had an atmosphere of joy and celebration. John and Mary felt finally at peace, surrounded by their loved ones and the affection of that unexpected young couple. Throughout the night, the guests danced, sang, and shared stories. John and Mary reminisced about their long journey together, while Lucas and Isabella listened attentively and with admiration. "You know, we never had the opportunity to organize a grand wedding celebration when we got married. It was always something simple, with just a few friends and family," Mary said, with a nostalgic smile. "Well, now is the time to do it, isn't it?" John said, caressing his wife's face. And so, the four of them embraced the joy of the celebration, toasting to the love that united them and the victory over adversity. As the wedding celebration was in full swing, John and Mary approached Lucas and Isabella, carrying an envelope. "Dear friends, we have something very important to tell you," John said, with a gentle smile. Isabella and Lucas, curious. "What is it, John? You both seem so serious." Mary tenderly held the young couple's hands. "Well, after everything we've been through with our children, we've made a very important decision." John then opened the envelope and pulled out some papers. "We've made a new will, in which we've left this house to you, Lucas and Isabella." Lucas and Isabella's eyes widened in surprise. They couldn't believe what they had just heard. "What? You mean this house is ours?" Isabella exclaimed, astonished. "That's right, my dear. You helped us when we needed it the most and showed us the true value of love and compassion. That's why we want this house to be yours," Mary explained, her eyes brimming with tears. Lucas shook his head, still in disbelief. "But, why would you do this? This is your home, the inheritance you'll leave for your children." "Precisely for that reason, Lucas. Our children have already shown that they don't value this house as they should. We want it to be with people who will love and care for it the way we do, John replied, squeezing the young man's shoulder. Isabella couldn't hold back her tears. We don't know what to say. This is so generous and surprising of you. You don't need to say anything, my dear. We just want you to be happy here, taking care of this home that we love so much, Mary said, hugging Isabella affectionately. Lucas and Isabella were moved by this noble and unexpected gesture. They never imagined that John and Mary would see them as the heirs to their beloved home. This revelation would certainly change the course of that family story. The news that John and Mary had left their beloved home to Lucas and Isabella in their will shocked not only the young couple, but also Luis and Marcia, who had until then kept their distance from the celebration. Luis, visibly uncomfortable, approached his parents. What? You can't be serious. This house is our inheritance. John looked at his son firmly. No, Luis. This house will belong to Lucas and Isabella from now on. We've already made this decision. Marcia tried to intervene, with a pleading look. But, Dad, Mom, why? We are your children, we should be the natural heirs. Mary sighed deeply before responding. Precisely because you are our children that we made this decision. You've shown us that you don't value this house the way we do. Luis and Marcia fell silent, clearly ashamed and remorseful. They knew they had made a grave mistake in trying to take advantage of their parents. Isabella, moved by the situation, approached the couple. Please, don't be angry with your parents. They just want the best for all of us. Lucas placed his hand on Luis's shoulder. This house represents much more than just a property. You should cherish the love and memories it holds. Gradually, the tension dissipated. John and Mary watched the scene with attentive eyes, hoping their children would finally understand. Marcia wiped away a furtive tear. Mom, Dad, we're so sorry for trying to take your house away. Now we understand how important it is to our family. Luis nodded, visibly embarrassed. You're right. This house will always be a home for all of us, not just an investment. John and Mary, relieved. They extended their arms, calling their children in for a welcoming embrace. We love you, children. And we know that, in time, you will also learn to love this house the way we do, John said, his voice choked with emotion. Luis and Marcia surrendered to their parents' affection, feeling forgiven and reconnected. This was a moment of healing and reconciliation, where family love prevailed over greed and conflict. After the emotional reconciliation between John, Mary, and their children, the focus of the celebration turned to Lucas and Isabella, the unexpected guardians of the family home. John and Mary approached the young couple, their faces lit up with genuine smiles. Dear friends, we don't know how to thank you for everything you've done for us, John said, squeezing Lucas's hands. You saved us in such a difficult moment and even gave us such a generous gift, Mary added, her tears flowing freely. Isabella tenderly held Mary's hands. You don't need to thank us, Mrs. Mary. We are honored to be able to help you and take care of this special home. Yes, this house will always have a very important place in our lives. We will treat it with all the love and respect it deserves, Lucas affirmed, with determination. John smiled, visibly moved. We know that, my young friend. That's why we decided to entrust you with our greatest treasure. Mary nodded, squeezing her husband's arm. This house carries so many memories and so much love. We want you to preserve it and turn it into a warm home, just as we did. Isabella and Lucas, their eyes shining with gratitude and admiration. They couldn't believe that this elderly couple, whom they had so readily helped, were now rewarding them with such a gift. You have our word, John and Mary. We will take care of this house as if it were our own, with all the love and dedication, Isabella promised, squeezing the couple's hand. John and Mary felt immensely relieved and happy. After so many adversities, they had finally found people who deserved to inherit the home they had built with so much love. Thank you, you too. You are angels in our lives, John said, pulling Isabella and Lucas into a warm embrace. At that moment, the party transformed into a celebration of love, compassion, and the renewal of a family that, despite the difficulties, had managed to overcome the obstacles and find happiness. John and Mary knew that their home would be in good hands, and this filled them with peace and satisfaction. This was today's story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Thanks and see you next time.